Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome to another video. Today we are filming my first wrap up, I think, which is my August wrap up. August was my best reading month. I read 10 books, well 9.5, but either way I finished 10 books, which for me, given that in 2021 I read one book the entire year, is really good. So I'm really happy with myself and I'm really excited to tell you about the books that I read. We've got a very, very romance heavy agenda on today's video, so hopefully you enjoy romance, because if you do, you'll probably like this video and maybe pick up some new recommendations for books you might enjoy. First up we have Delilah Greene Doesn't Care by Ashley Herring Blake. First things first, I absolutely love the cover of this book. It's drawn by Lynn Kaufman and I will honestly buy any book that has a cover drawn by Lynn. Honestly, her art is so beautiful. I just think the way that she does book covers is so gorgeous. So that is in part a big reason why I picked up this book, but also it is really popular on BookTube. A lot of people have read it and loved it. It was a book of the month book, I think, so it's kind of very much done the rounds, so I thought I would give it a chance. This is a trilogy, the second of which I'm pretty sure comes out this month, and it's called Astrid Parker Doesn't Something Something. And Astrid is Delilah's stepsister. I can't remember the full title of the book, but I'm pretty sure it comes out this month. So if you are someone who really likes romance trilogies, then this could be a good one for you, particularly as the second one is out or coming out really soon. So in this book we follow Delilah and Claire. This is a sapphic romance, as are the other two books that are coming out in this trilogy. And Delilah is from a town called Bright Falls, which is a sort of very small town, and she left it as soon as she was old enough. Her parents passed away when she was young. She spent a lot of her life living with Astrid and Astrid's mum, and she really struggled with that. She's quirky, she really struggled to fit in. She had a really difficult relationship with Astrid and her mum. And so as soon as she is old enough, she escapes to New York and doesn't look back until Astrid invites her to be the photographer for her wedding. And so she decides to accept it. It's worth a lot of money. Astrid and her mum come from money. And so she decides to take the job. She needs the money. New York is expensive, but it does come with going back to Bright Falls, having to sort of resettle into that life and deal with a lot of stuff that Delilah has kind of pushed down for a lot of her adult years. We then also have Claire, and Claire is Astrid, Delilah's stepsister's best friend, and she is single, has a daughter called Ruby. She is still very much kind of in the life of Ruby's dad, Josh, so they do still have kind of a difficult relationship, but she is single and she is kind of is put up to a bet by their other friend whose name escapes me. Does it begin with an I? Is it Isla or something like that? That doesn't feel quite right, but it's something like that. But their other friend, and the third book will focus on that friend, she's put up to a sort of bet by the friend to hit on this attractive woman who is standing at the bar, which happens to be Delilah. And so in this story, we're following Delilah and Claire sort of going through their feelings for each other, particularly as they had complicated feelings for each other when they were younger, and so it's then looking at their feelings for each other now. It's dealing with Delilah and the grief of her parents and how she deals with Astrid and her mum and the difficult relationship there. And we're dealing with Claire kind of figuring out the relationship with Josh and her daughter Ruby, who's a preteen and kind of really struggling and things like that. So there's kind of a lot that happens in this story. The romance obviously is part of it, and so, you know, there are kind of steamy scenes in here, if you like that kind of thing, but to be honest, it's not as much of a focus of the book as I was potentially expecting. The book is actually very story heavy. There is a lot of plot, there's a lot of processing of Delilah's grief and Claire's struggles with Josh and Ruby. So yeah, there is a lot of story in this one if that is something that you like in a romance. Overall, I gave this one 3 stars. I had a really good time reading it. It's not my favorite story ever. I think mostly because Delilah is not my favorite sort of character ever. I know a lot of people really love Delilah in this, and you know, she's beautiful, she's got wild curly hair, she's got tattoos. You can see why Claire is so attracted to her, but I think for me, Claire is much more like me, as is Astrid, and so I just don't have anything in common with Delilah, and so it was harder for me to always agree with some of the decisions that she made in the story. And so obviously a lot of the story is focused on her, but I love Claire. I think that Claire and Ruby's relationship feels really real. I also really felt like I could very much understand the relationship that Claire and Josh were having. So they had kids when they were young and Josh just wasn't ready to be a dad. And I was with people when I was younger who I think if we had had kids then, I think it would have been really similar to what Claire and Josh have been through. And so I felt like I could just really get on board with that. I really like Ashley Herring-Blake's writing style overall. The steamy scenes weren't my favourite that I've ever read, but I thought they were pretty good. They are a bit fade to black, I would say. There is a little bit of that. And so that kind of depends if you like that or not. So I maybe would have liked a little bit more. But overall, I really do think this is a good time. I would recommend reading it. And I'm really excited to pick up the next one because I won't go into details so as not to spoil it for you, but Astrid's story is a big focus of this book. And now we're moving on to what is going to be, I think, a really interesting time in looking at how Astrid is going to be kind of going through some stuff. And so I think that's going to be really interesting to read in the second book. The only thing I would say is like this book took me a little while to get through, and that's also kind of why I think I wouldn't rate it higher than 3 stars, because this is the book that took me from like the middle of July into the first week of August. And that in part was because I had my birthday and I was away and things like that. But also I just wasn't desperate to pick this up. And often I am with romances. I like think about them all the time if I'm not reading them. And I wasn't kind of desperate to finish this one. I wasn't necessarily completely in love with the characters that I would like sort of wanted to fly through it. So that's my personal opinion. This book's really popular. It's really well rated on Goodreads. A lot of people love it. So I would recommend picking it up if you like a romance. This is Delilah Greene Doesn't Care. Next up we have Love and Other Great Expectations by Becky Dean. This is a YA that I picked up at Yauk. I was so excited to read this. It's just so my kind of vibe. I have a vlog of me reading this. In fact, in that vlog, I also talk about Delilah Greene Doesn't Care and the next book. So you can check that out if you want to. But I know this one was like a big part of the vlog. And with this one, this is so the kind of book that I would have picked up as a YA. So if you like Mary-Kate and Ashley films, I would so recommend this because it's such a Mary-Kate and Ashley film. So basically we follow Britt and Luke, and Britt is in America, and we know from the very opening pages of the book, has had a major injury that has affected her ability to play soccer, which is her whole life and identity, to be honest, at least at the beginning of the book. And her English teacher sends her and a couple of other classmates on a scavenger hunt to the UK, where it kind of turns out has like some kind of charity or something like that, where she is sort of helping other kids and she has some money to give away. We don't really know why. And she brings some of the kids from her school to go on this scavenger hunt around the UK. Britt meets a guy called Luke at a children's centre, orphanage, and just instantly feels a connection to him. Luke hasn't really got much else going on, which we find out kind of more why as we go through the story, and he decides to tag along with Britt on her adventure around the UK to complete the scavenger hunt, and in the process feelings develop between Britt and Luke. That's effectively it. This is a really good time. This is a really good time. So as I say, if you like those kind of Mary-Kate and Ashley stories, I would really recommend this. It is just so similar in vibe. The romance in this is very cute, and I think that teens to YA could read this. I would say probably a teen would enjoy it more. The kind of way the relationship is kind of something I would have loved to have read at kind of 13, 14, I think. So it's really cute. Luke is such a good role model for what boyfriends should be like. If you are a parent or an adult buying this for someone younger to read, Luke is a really positive person to sort of be someone that your teens should kind of look to consider for a partner. So I really like that. There's no bad boy energy in here. I just love Luke. He's so lovely. I gave this 3.5 stars. The reason I didn't give it more is this is the debut novel for the author, and I think it maybe needed just a little bit more editing at times in terms of particularly around Brit's character. We learn a lot about Brit in the last sort of third of this story, and in part I think that's intentional because Brit discovers a lot about herself as part of being on this scavenger hunt, but I kind of think that we needed to know a bit more about Brit from the beginning. There's a few things at the end where Brit kind of says, this is how I feel about that, and I've always felt this way, and you think, have you? We didn't know that. So just a little bit more sort of character awareness of Brit throughout the story I think would have really helped me. But in general, this is a really good time. I flew through it. It is a real love letter to the UK. So this author lives in America, but you can tell she's been to the UK and she's been to these places and loves them. And obviously most of the people that read this are going to be in America, and so it's a really lovely representation of the UK for them. But as someone who lives in the UK, it actually made me really want to go and explore some areas of the UK I haven't been before, and the representation that it has of the areas that it shows are really accurate. So one of the areas portrayed in here is the Roman baths, which my family are from Bath, but I'd only ever been to the Roman baths for the first time last year, and it's a really, really accurate portrayal of the Roman baths. We get a trip to Scotland in here, we get to go to Glastonbury, so some really nice love letter to the UK. So I think if you like YA, so speaking to the adults here, if you like YA, semi-young YA, so teen, I would say, then this is a really good time. It's a really easy book to fly through. If you are someone who wants a book recommendation for a teen, I would recommend this. Okay, so next we have You, Me and Our Heartstrings by Melissa C. And I also rated this 3 stars. I talk about this quite a lot in the vlog, so if you want to go and check this out, I would recommend it. But this was a complicated 3-star for me, and I'm not sure I actually feel 3 stars about this book. So in this story, we follow Noah and Daisy, and they are 2 students who go to the same specialist music college and are both hoping to go to Juilliard. And they are preparing for their Juilliard auditions, and they get paired together to perform in a concert. And Noah is from a really musical family, and he is the most diligent musician. He's very serious. Daisy is not from that kind of family. Her parents run like a flower shop in New York, and she clearly still loves her music so much, but clearly comes from a very sort of different lifestyle to Noah. Daisy also has cerebral palsy, so we do have some cerebral palsy rep in here, and it is a big focus of the story. So if that's something that you are hoping to read more of, and this is written by a disabled author. So basically, the blurb of this is a little bit misleading because the blurb of the story says that Noah and Daisy basically play their duet and the video goes viral, and then it's about how they deal with the fame of the video going viral. That is not accurate because that happens in like the final third of this story and is quite a rushed plot point in the final third. This is actually about Noah and Daisy developing feelings for each other, and Noah has anxiety, really severe anxiety, and so it's about him dealing with his anxiety. It's about Daisy dealing with her cerebral palsy. It's a lot more about that than it is what the blurb says. So just to let you know about that, the blurb is in theory a really big spoiler for this book in that it happens in the final third of the story. So in terms of the things I like about this book, I really like Noah. He is also a really good role model for what I think teens should be looking for in partners. So I like Noah a lot. He's really cute. He like buys flowers for Daisy really early on, so that's adorable, and he clearly has feelings from Daisy from really early on, although she is like in love with him, I think, from like before the book starts. So I really like Noah. The anxiety rep in this, so I really don't like to speak for the cerebral palsy rep in this because I don't have cerebral palsy, so please do seek out an Own Voices review for that. But I do have anxiety, and I have very similar anxiety to Noah, down to the types of anxiety attacks that he has, so I do feel that I can speak to that, and I do think it is a pretty good representation of anxiety. The only things I would say is that this book does then deal with medication for anxiety, which happens earlier than him getting psychological help, and maybe that's how it's done in the States, but I'm not sure if that's how kind of the process would be dealt with here in the UK. But he does kind of get a therapist, so there is a balance of like medication and therapy. So those are the things I like. In terms of the story, the story feels a bit the pacing is just off, and that is obviously in part to do with the fact the main part of the story happens in the final third. The way that that part of the story is resolved just happens in like one scene, and I really struggled to get behind that. So that actual part of the plot was just kind of something I struggled with. The epilogue for this is one of those really like dreamy epilogues, and so also that was kind of difficult to get on board with. Also, I talk about this in the vlog as well, but there is a part of this where very, very early on in being together, which I don't think that that's really a spoiler because it happens from quite early in the story. But when Noah and Daisy are together, from really early on, Daisy considers about having sex with Noah, and I'm not convinced that that should have been addressed in the way it was addressed in this story. They don't, ultimately, because it's against Daisy's religion, but also because they have only been together like a week. And I just think the way that they dealt with it was more focused on the religion aspect, which is fine, but didn't really talk about the fact they had only been together a week. So I think that that needed like a little bit more story development. In fact, I'm not really sure why it was mentioned at all, because it's hinted at in the epilogue. Anyway, so I'm not really sure kind of why that was included in here at all. I don't think it was really needed. It was almost kind of just like really kind of pushing in the part about Daisy's religion, which we really know Daisy's religious in this because it mentions about her going to church a lot. So I don't think that it was necessary to include. Another thing though that I did really like about this book is there is a lot of good rep for characters from different backgrounds, different cultures, and it's really not shoehorned into this story. Like it's very much just part of life. Like one of the characters, it kind of just mentions that like her prayer mat's in the corner of her bedroom. It's just a thing that's part of her life, and I really like that, and it happens a lot in this story. We have one of Noah's brothers is gay, and so it just feels a really good, rich, diverse cultural society within this story. So I did really like that. So yeah, at the moment I put this book as 3 stars because ultimately I think that it's good that we are getting disability rep in YA, and the story idea of this is super interesting. But I'm not sure I enjoyed it as much as, say, for example, Delilah Greene Doesn't Care, and like a lot of romances that I read are 3 stars. 3 stars is kind of my benchmark for like a romance I enjoyed. And I think I had enough problems with this book that it maybe isn't a 3-star for me, but it doesn't have a lot of ratings on Goodreads, and I feel like if I rated it a 2.5, I would drop my Goodreads rating to 2, and that feels like quite, I don't want to sort of damage the book because ultimately I appreciate that with a YA book it isn't written for me. So it's a really difficult one. So it's somewhere between 2.5 and 3 stars. I do think that there are teens who would gain a lot from this book. It's just the pacing is not quite right for me. There are some things in it I didn't like, but there are things in it to like. And also this cover is gorgeous. It's so cute. But I am going to be unhauling this because I don't see myself ever rereading it, which, because I love the cover so much, is so gutting. But I just don't see that I would pick up this book again. But I think there are people out there who would love it. So that is You, Me and Our Heartstrings. Next up we have The Soulmate Equation by Christina Lauren, and this is the first but will definitely not be the last Christina Lauren book I pick up. I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. In this we follow Jess, who is a data scientist by trade. She ends up crossing paths with River, who runs a DNA dating app, and basically for various reasons ends up submitting her DNA into the app. And her and River score a 98, which is the highest that anyone has ever scored in this app. And the company asked Jess to publicly date River so that it has basically good publicity for the app. And then the story goes from there. It's so interesting. There is a lot of data in this. Christina Lauren are either experts at data or really research their stuff for data, because I really believed in everything that River and Jess were talking about where the data was concerned. It was a little bit too much data for me, but you can gloss over it, but it did make me feel like maybe a little bit silly at times that I couldn't really understand all of it. But it does mean that you really believe that Jess and River are properly great data scientists. So I love that aspect of it. The family aspect of this story is what I love the most, I think. So Jess is a single mom. Her daughter, whose name I cannot remember, but her daughter is adorable, and she has a best friend called Fizzy, and Fizz is very much part of her life, is sort of in some ways the other part to her, helps raise her kid. Her grandparents, they really are involved in Jess and her daughter's life as well. And so all of that element of it is so adorable. River is this book Grumpy Sunshine? I don't know, because I don't think I would describe Jess as sunshine. I also don't think I would describe it as enemies to lovers. I think there are people who would describe this as enemies to lovers, but I don't think it is. It just, in terms of like, if you think of enemies to lovers as like the hating game, this is not it. It's different. But it is, I would say there is an element of kind of enemies to lovers / grumpy sunshine thing. But ultimately it's more the case that like Jess and River don't know each other, and then he is someone who's just really introverted and really focused on his work, and then has to publicly date somebody as good publicity for his company. It's just a really interesting idea, in my opinion. I've read a lot of romance, and I've never read a story like this. So I just think it's really interesting, and I really believed in Jess's life. I really believed in her kid and her grandparents and Fizz. So I just really loved all of those elements. River is lovely. You know, he's obviously very attractive and all this kind of stuff, but he is really caring towards Jess and towards Jess's daughter. And you really, like, at first I was like, Jess, why do you find this guy attractive? But you get on board with him at about the same time that Jess does, which is really good writing. That if you had any reservations about him before, which I did, you lose those once Jess starts to kind of fall for him. So that's really cool. The story of this, the drama that happens, I didn't expect. Well, no, I did expect, but the way that it's handled is not necessarily how I expected it to be handled. So I thought that was interesting, and it was navigated pretty well. So I enjoyed that element of it. There is also a lot of background with Jess's family, which is, to be honest, quite emotional. If you're someone who has any kind of issues with drugs or parents, or kind of neglect parents, stuff like that, it's really heavy duty, some of the stuff with Jess's mum. So just be aware of that going in. But overall, I would absolutely recommend this. I think it's really enjoyable. I really wanted to know what happened. I flew through it. I loved Jess and River. I loved reading about Jess's life. Yeah, I don't know whether we're getting a Fizz book. I feel like, so Fizz, basically, she writes romance. So I don't know whether she's sort of representing Christina Lauren in this or what, but I would happily read a book about Fizz if one is written. I would love to read more sort of in this like Jess River world, because I really enjoyed it. So I would definitely recommend this if it sounds like your kind of thing. So that is the Soulmate Equation by Christina Lauren. Okay, now we get into the big romance books. These are like 400 pages. So this is It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. And in this story, we follow Piper, who, so I haven't watched Schitt's Creek, okay? But if you have, this is like kind of like Schitt's Creek fanfic, I think, from what I've read. But basically, Piper and her sister are sort of Instagram, like LA celebrities, and Piper acts out against a comment from an idiot that she is dating, and she gets into trouble. She gets arrested. Her sister bails her out, but her stepdad is like, no, that's it, we're cutting you off. You need to move back to the small town that your deceased father was from, this small fishing town. We're going to give you the bar that he owned, and you need to like figure out your own way and live from there. So that's the story. I have to say, the premise of this story is so not my kind of thing, okay? I'm not interested in Instagram or celebrity culture. Like, I actively avoid it. I don't watch a lot of shows that are really popular that I would consider kind of Instagram culture. It's not to say that I don't enjoy them. Like, I watch them when I'm in Travelodges and it's absolutely fine, but I don't actively watch Towie, or I was about to say The Only Way is Essex, but that is Towie, but like Made in Chelsea or Love Island or anything like that. I don't watch any of those shows. Absolutely no hate to anyone that watches them, because as I say, if someone has it on, I will get very invested very quickly, but it's just not something that I choose to spend my time in, is that kind of like Instagram celebrity culture. So I didn't really think that I would enjoy this book, to be honest. It's not like I went in it wanting to hate read it or anything, but I didn't think it was going to be the story for me. The reasons I picked it up is A, this cover is absolutely stunning. So that's the first thing. I'm such a cover buyer. But also, everyone loves this book. I have a really, you know, I follow an artist on Instagram who draws a lot of profile pictures for booktubers, and so many people have this book in their profile picture. So I thought, right, I'm in a romance mood, I'm gonna read this. I also had read, I watched the vlog of Steph Loves, and she spoke about the second one, which is called Hook, Line and Sinker, and said about how much she loved that, and it was like a friends to lovers romance and stuff, and I was like, great, that sounds like my kind of thing, but you do really need to read It Happened One Summer first, to be honest. There are some of these romance books where you don't need to read the first one, but in the case of this, I really would recommend that you read the first one. So I kind of read this one being like, I want to read Hook, Line and Sinker. I really enjoyed this, and I should not have enjoyed this. So basically in the story, we're following Piper renovating this bar back to, well, I say it's former glory, but she's kind of changing it into being her own thing. And in the process, she meets a guy called Brendan, who is a really like gruff, possessive, quite rude love interest. It is everything I don't like in a love interest, to be honest. I don't really like that kind of, the way that relationships like that are presented. I don't like the way that Brendan is so like, ownership-y is not a word, but I'm really sorry, my brain is so fried, but like, I can't think of the word, but he really like asserts his authority over Piper. And I don't like any of those aspects of the story. These steamy scenes in this, wow. Like, you go from like the kind of fade to black of Delilah Greene, not quite as fade to black, but you go from that to this. Wow. It's okay. They're really, I don't really mean graphic in a bad way, but they are graphic. It's very in depth. So if you do not like that, you're going to find this book in particular. The second one you might enjoy, but this one, you are not going to enjoy it. It's steamy scenes like throughout. So yeah, particularly with the whole like Piper and Brendan thing, like Piper is not a character that I should particularly like, and Brendan is categorically not a character I should like. However, Piper really redeems himself, which I'm sure is the point of the book, but the way that Tessa Bailey writes her, Tessa Bailey's writing is really smart and funny, by the way, I should say. I think Tessa Bailey is an excellent author, so that's also why these are so enjoyable. But the way she writes Piper is actually Piper becomes so likable, and you're really rooting for her. Some of the things she does, I kind of think, would you do that? Like, you are this like spoiled celebrity. And as I say, I haven't seen Schitt's Creek, but you don't really get a lot of Piper learning to be different. Piper was already that way, is kind of how the story's portrayed. Like, her sister is always saying she's super kind and caring. It's just she's kind of misunderstood, rather than it being that she has to learn to be nice and caring and kind. She just is. And so she is likable from pretty early on because she is always thinking about other people. So I think that's a big reason you can get on board with it, because Piper just is not an unlikable character. And Brendan's love for Piper, I really did believe it. I did. Even though I don't think I should, and even though I didn't like the sort of possessive nature, like it really does get quite possessive as you go through the story. And there is some element of like kind of sugar daddy-ness because Brendan makes a lot of money as a fisherman. But I really enjoyed it. And you really feel the town. You really get a vibe for the town and a feel for the fishing culture. And I just really enjoyed it. I shouldn't have enjoyed it, but I really enjoyed it. So I gave it 4 stars, which when I think about that feels really crazy because I really did enjoy the Soulmate Equation, but I read this right after and I felt like I enjoyed it as much. So I gave it 4 stars. What else can I say? But then I went straight into Hook, Line and Sinker. I mean, I was so in this world. I was so in this world that I had to read the next one. And the way that Steph had spoken about this, I was really keen to read this one because the tropes of it are more my kind of thing. So we have friends to lovers. Basically, this is following Piper's younger sister, Hannah, and Brendan's best friend, Fox. And Hannah and Fox have, they're mentioned a little bit in the first book, but you get some hints from the first book that Hannah and Fox are hanging out quite a lot and becoming good friends. And then in this story, it's basically set 7 months on from the first one, and Hannah moves back to LA and leaves Piper in the fishing town. I can't remember what it's called. And Fox has been messaging her this whole time, and he can't think of anything but her. He knows he's fully in love with her, but doesn't really know what to do about it. And he is a notorious ladies' man. He has a really not a bad reputation, but he very much has a reputation for sleeping around a lot, and he hasn't slept with anybody in basically since he's met Hannah. We're also following Hannah and her career, and basically she's trying to make it in the movie biz. She brings her company to the fishing village to film some stuff for a film. And initially she is infatuated with the director of the film, but she's increasingly realizing that she has feelings for Fox. And then it's them kind of figuring out how they're going to go, or if they're going to go from friends to something else. And I do think I enjoyed this story more than It Happened One Summer, because I just should. I really liked the representation of Fox and him kind of figuring out how to break away from an image put on him, of Hannah figuring out how she will navigate that, how she can deal with her feelings of him versus the director guy that she is infatuated with. This is a really different story to It Happened One Summer in that there is way less steam, which, given that Fox is like a ladies' man, it's so much more a story about Fox and Hannah's relationship and figuring out whether they can or can't be something than like the Brendan and Piper, where they just start sleeping together from like really early on. So the stories are really different in that way. I really liked Hannah and Fox. I found them really believable. You get a little bit frustrated being like, just tell each other you love each other, but you know, that's typical in these kind of like friends to lovers tropes. So yeah, I did really enjoy this. I gave it like 4.25 stars. It's a really difficult one to star because sometimes I think, did I love this more than It Happened One Summer or love it more than the Soulmate Equation? Possibly not. But it feels weird to give this and It Happened One Summer 4 stars because I should like this one more. But I didn't want to give it 4.5 stars because I gave The Love Hypothesis 4.5 stars, and I know that's a 4.5 star book. And I know that I liked that more than this. So it's somewhere around 4 to 4.25, something like that. But yeah, I would recommend picking these up. As I say, I really like Tessa Bailey's writing style. I think she is someone that I would definitely read more books from, so I'm interested in picking some more up. The steamy scenes are a little bit like traditional, that you get kind of mentions of like the core and things like that, which I don't love. They're not like my favorite steamy scenes. Like my favorite steamy scenes are The Love Hypothesis, but yeah, I still think these are enjoyable. They are really different, and so they're worth reading from that perspective. There won't be any more in this series because we do get an epilogue in this one, so you know it's kind of pretty much wrapped up. But yeah, these are enjoyable. I'd recommend picking them up. So this was Hook, Line and Sinker by Tessa Bailey. Next up we have Mr. Wrong Number by Lynn Painter. I picked this up based on an Instagram ad, so Instagram ads work, people. All my ads are books now, and it's really difficult not to just like add to cart every time. But in this story, we learn from the very first page that Liv has burnt down her flat. And over the course of the first kind of third of this book, we learn that Liv is, I would kind of say, one of life's unlucky people. She's very clumsy. She has a lot of accidents that happen. And she moves in with her brother Jack when she burns her flat down, which I'm not sure she entirely burns her flat down, but it is a pretty bad fire that happens, but it's very much worded as like burnt flat down. And there is definitely an element of her kind of, yeah, trying to deal with the fact she's like living with her brother. She has some family issues as well. And Jack's roommate Colin lives there also, and one day Liv gets a text from a wrong number, and they enter into a text relationship, and eventually Colin realizes that it's Liv that he's texting, but keeps it up, and so that's where the drama of the book comes from, effectively, whilst Liv and Colin in real life are kind of recognizing that they have feelings for each other. The first third of this book was very difficult to read for me, and to be honest, put me in a reading slump, which, not that bad a reading slump, I still read 10 books in August, but I think I could have read more if it wasn't for this book, because I just wasn't that excited to read that much. So I just wasn't picking it up because it wasn't like I was willing to drop other things in order to read it. Which is a shame because the second and third part of this are fine. But the first third was not for me. Liv isn't really not my favourite character in a romance. She's young as well. She's like 25 and yeah, I think I'm showing signs of my age here at 30. I just found her quite immature and I just really, you just sort of wanted to shake her and be like, mature up, Liv. The way that she speaks is very immature and I just really struggled with her. I found Colin a bit easier, but at times he was a little bit possessive and not anti-feminist, that's dramatic, but a little bit misogynistic. And Liv talks a lot in here about being feminist, and so I really struggled to understand what she found attractive in Colin because he was at times openly misogynistic, so it felt like they maybe weren't the best pairing. But there were definitely times in like part 2 and 3 where I was getting that real like butterfly feeling and like wanting them to be together, and the other recent romances I've read haven't made me feel that way. So I gave this 3 stars overall because even though I'm not convinced I think it is a 3-star, the writing style is not for me, of this author or at least of this character. But I flew through the second and third part and I was really rooting for Liv and Colin to get together. So it's difficult. I am going to unhaul this though. So it's difficult for me to say if I would recommend it because I will never reread this. Whereas like the other romances that I've talked about in here, I could see myself rereading, but this one just is not one that I would want to reread. I also felt that the kind of wrap up of the story with Nick was like really convenient. Also the final few chapters of drama. And that's what I mean by like struggling with Liv, is like she was so dramatic in the final part of this story that after a while you were like, why have I invested so much time in you? So I did find her annoying, but you know, as I say, overall, it wasn't the best book I've read. It wasn't the worst book I've read. It was fine. I had a good time reading the second and third parts of this. So yeah, I don't know if I would 100% recommend it, but I do think if you like romance, you might enjoy this. It's worth having a look. This is Mr. Wrong Number by Lynn Painter. And then we have Beach Read by Emily Henry. So my plan for this was to binge read Book Lovers, Beach Read, and You and Me on Vacation in one vlog. I know that Olivia Reads a Latte has now done this. I had started my vlog before I even knew she was doing it. And so I feel a little bit weird about whether I post that now because I think it's going to look like I copied her even though I didn't. We just both happen to have the same idea. So we'll see. I haven't read the third one yet. So you're going to be getting my feels for these books in this video anyway. But we'll see. Let me know what you think about me still posting that vlog. So that was my plan, was to binge read the 3 Emily Henry books. I would totally not recommend binging Emily Henry. If you've not read Emily Henry books, they look like fluffy romances. They are anything but fluffy romances. They will absolutely break you, and it is way too heartbreaking to read 3 in one go. Like, I shouldn't have read 2 in one go, because I think I enjoyed Book Lovers less because I was so broken from Beach Read. So yeah, I would actually recommend you space them out. I would really not recommend binging them. But anyway, this is Beach Read. So I'm gonna read to you because I'm pretty proud of my Goodreads review for this, but I feel like this is like, it really sums up what I feel about it. So my review opens with "This book broke me," and then I want to straight up say the marketing for this book is wrong. The title, which I assume is ironic, cover, visuals and blurb make you think you're getting a light and fluffy steamy romance that is very casually about 2 authors writing in each other's genres. What you actually get is a heartbreaking tale of 2 people going through a lot of life crap who have to work out if and how they can deal with it to be enough for each other. Be prepared to cry, have your heart ripped in 2, and grieve for people you don't even know. It is everything but a beach read in my opinion, but I loved it. That pretty much says everything I want to say. So the way that this is marketed is that January and Gus are both writers and they are both experiencing some kind of writer's block, and they are then basically end up sort of putting a deal against each other that they will write a book in each other's genres and see who can get published first. That's like the very top level surface of this book. And as I said, I really think the marketing for this is completely wrong. Like, I picked all of the Emily Henry books up thinking they would be light, fluffy romances, which is what I was in the mood for. This cover and the blurb just do not give you any indication how much these books are going to break you. So just go in knowing it, okay? There are so many trigger warnings for this book. I'm not going to spoil them all here because you need to read them for yourself, because they are spoilers if I talk to you about them. But January's stuff, her family stuff, is stuff I have lived through. And I think that is why this broke me. I know that everyone's favorite Emily Henry book is Book Lovers, okay? I know that. But January's life was my life. And I wasn't expecting it, and it's from really early in the book. To be honest, I feel like if I said it, it wouldn't be a spoiler, but I'm not going to. But it's from really early in the book. We find out about January's family stuff, and I was like, huh, this is my life. So someone is talking about my life, and it just... So the reason I love this book, I do think is personal to me in many ways. Also Gus and the anxiety that he deals with. I felt seen in the way that was written, which is the same way that Charlie in Heartstopper makes me feel, that someone was able to accurately represent how I feel in life on a page, and I have never read that before. So I really love Gus in this. There's other things I love. So Emily Henry's writing is beautiful. It is funny. It is witty. It is poignant. It's so good. And also Gus is not... and neither is I can't think of the name, but neither is the love interest in Book Lovers either. So this is, I guess, probably an Emily Henry thing, that Gus is real. He has real problems. He, yes, is attractive, but he's like graying hair. And like, you know, I say that as someone whose hair is very much graying and has been since I was like 12. He is graying. He is a little bit older. He felt so real to me, and I really loved that. Yeah, I cannot tell you enough how much I recommend picking up Emily Henry's books, but go into them knowing they're going to break. I sobbed. I absolutely sobbed my way through Beach Read. I would also say, I don't know if you're a fan of Avenue Q, the musical, like I am, but the final number, For Now, that's how I feel about Emily Henry's books. It's like... is it a happy ending, or is it just, I don't know. It's a difficult feeling to explain, but go listen to For Now. And if you've read Beach Read, tell me that this ending does not feel that way. I absolutely love this. It was 5 stars. I didn't ever know if I would give a romance 5 stars. There were several times that I debated whether I should give The Love Hypothesis 5 stars. Like, it's a book I still think about often. And to be honest, I think I probably think about it more than I think about Beach Read. But I think that's partly because I just read Love on the Brain. But this just was something special. So I'm glad that this was what I waited to give my 5-star romance to. That is Beach Read by Emily Henry. So my second to last book was Book Lovers by Emily Henry. Again, the marketing for this, so off. Definitely also not a fluffy romance. So in this, we follow Nora, who is a book agent. She is fiery and feisty, and she knows what she wants, and she fights for her clients. And one of her authors writes a book which effectively writes Nora as a character known as the Shark. And so a lot of this book is Nora kind of dealing with the image people have of her. Her sister, Libby, is pregnant with her 3rd child and asks Nora to come with her to the setting that Dusty, the author, wrote this book about, kind of under the guise of like it being linked to Dusty's book and wanting a break, but there's actually plot I didn't really see coming of actually why they go there. And so Nora goes with Libby, and when she's there, she keeps running into Charlie, who is a book agent back from her life, her kind of ordinary life. And it's, you know, there is a kind of enemies to lovers. Both of them are really sarcastic and quippy. And so they hit it off pretty quickly, but I think not, you know, especially in the case of Nora, doesn't kind of realize that there is attraction there as well, but they keep running into each other. So yeah, I know this is a lot of people's favorites. There is a lot to love in this. Nora is a good representation of people that are career-minded and driven, and that you can be that way and people can respect that. Charlie is just lovely. He, again, like Gus, feels really real. He's graying. He has like messy curly hair. You know, he feels raw. He has his own complicated life stuff that he's dealing with. And for me, the best thing in this is Charlie. I love him so much. I love the way that he feels about Nora. I also love that Nora isn't small. The one thing I didn't love about Beach Read is that January is small, and I just, as a curvy person, it's really difficult to read every romance, taking out the spoiler alert, but I didn't particularly like that book, but it's really, really difficult to find curvy rep in romance, and January is not curvy, but she's tall, and that was still enough. That was better than small. So I really liked that. I think what I didn't love as much about this is we deal a lot more with grief. Not that we don't in Beach Read, but the grief in this one feels a little bit repetitive at times. Like we deal with the same thing a little bit over and over. And so by the end, you're kind of worn out from that. The relationship between Nora and Libby, her sister, I am someone who like, I would have like loved to have a sister relationship. Like I don't have a sister. Would have loved to have had a sister relationship like Nora and Libby have. And so I found that difficult to read at times. I felt kind of neither of them were, you know, they were both taking for granted what they had. And just in general, I just wasn't as invested in the story. Also, there's less steam, so there's also that. But there's also, a lot of this book is about how like Nora doesn't believe she's going to get a happy ending. And I won't go into spoilers, but the book wraps up in a certain way. And I just don't feel like that's how I would have written the wrap up to this story, especially given I had just read Beach Read and know how Emily Henry can wrap up a story. So I just didn't feel like the right ending for this book. But I did still enjoy it. I gave it 4 stars. So I would still definitely recommend it. It's just Beach Read was just something special for me, whereas this one didn't kind of hit the same, but I would still totally recommend it. So that is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. Okay, final book I read this month was Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood. So I've mentioned the Love Hypothesis a few times in this book already. The Love Hypothesis I read back in like February time. It was like the second book I read in this new chapter of my reading life, and I loved it. I read it from start to finish in like 8 hours. I loved Olive. I loved Adam. I loved everything about that story, other than the fact that Olive was small and it was mentioned like a million times. But I loved the Love Hypothesis. So I was so excited when I saw that Ali Hazelwood had another book out. I haven't read the novellas, I should say, but I was so excited to read another novel. This cover, stunning. This is the Waterstone special edition, which has this gorgeous sprayed edge. This book is absolutely gorgeous. I was so excited to read this. I will have a vlog up of me reading this, so check that out. It will be out after this video. What I felt with this was that I was reading the Love Hypothesis again, but not as good. And this, it's just really similar. Like, I love that we're still following a woman in STEM, but the premise of it is just really similar. And B feels a lot like Olive, but less likable for me. She's also small. She's so small. I mean, I actively rolled my eyes at the mention of her being small. I really, like, I sat there and rolled them. Because it's like, it's such a defining feature about Ali Hazelwood's characters. It's like, okay, I understand people are small. Many thousands, millions of people are small. It could be mentioned once and not mentioned again. It doesn't need to be a defining feature about them, particularly given that the like romantic interest in Ali Hazelwood's books are always like 6'4", and they're just so tall. They're so big and so tall, and it's like it gets a little bit off-putting after a while. And so I could put it aside in the Love Hypothesis because I had such a good time, but I couldn't put it aside in this one. But basically, we follow the story of B, who ends up working for NASA on like a thing for astronauts. It's difficult. I'm trying to like. I wasn't even that invested in the science element of this, but basically it was like making some kind of neurological equipment for astronauts. And she ends up doing this with Levi, who is a scientist who is her arch nemesis. So that I think is also the problem for me, is that I don't like enemies to lovers. It's just very rare that I'm gonna like that. I much prefer Grumpy Sunshine, which Love Hypothesis is Grumpy Sunshine. I love the fake dating trope in that, whereas this one was just enemies to lovers, so it's not my favorite. And there really becomes a point where you're just like, B, why do you hate him like this? It gets really immature at times. And Levi is very likable. He's really sweet to be all the time. Like, obviously there's a little bit of like the enemies there because he's standoffish with her, but you learn why. And Levi's adorable. He is adorable. And his relationship with Penny, his friend's daughter, is adorable and stuff like that. So there's some elements of that are cute, but I just wasn't that invested in the story. I wasn't too invested in them getting together. I really didn't like the constant down that B would put on all men. And it just felt like I understood, like, I know I don't work in STEM, but I do work in a male-dominated environment, so I do understand how it feels to be a woman who is, like, competing with men at senior management. So that much of it I understand. And it just doesn't feel healthy that whilst I understand that she is, like, a feminist and wanting to promote women, why B needs to be so down on all men other than the guy she is, like, having a thing with. That it just felt really unnecessary. And I don't know how to pronounce it, so I'm really sorry, but her research assistant, like Rochio or something like that, is like horrible. And B's always like, I love her, after like every down thing she says. And it's like, but you wouldn't let a man speak to you like that. Like, it just, I don't know, it just felt like the balance wasn't quite right for me, in terms of, I didn't feel that she needed to speak about men like that when she was talking about men speaking down to women. It's like, well, you don't also need to sexualize all of them or say that all of them are pointless. That just felt kind of too far, and like it was almost distracting from the point. I didn't get the stuff with the cats. I apologize. Like, I just didn't. I mean, Schrodinger as a name for a cat is adorable, but I just didn't really get the point of them as a plot point. I didn't like the way that Guy was described. He was very much described as like cute guy TM. That's a phrase from this. As, yeah, very much like, oh, what a cute average guy. And I do not like it when romance books talk about average guys as like they're nothing. I don't like that. And this comes up quite a lot in this story, you know, whereas Levi gets to be like cute guy and sexy guy and whatever else guy. So I didn't like the way that was portrayed. The final act drama in this is like a next level of drama. I don't know why it needed to be quite this dramatic. Maybe I don't understand the full gravity of what they're doing in this like NASA project, but my goodness, it was like so intense. And I just felt it wasn't needed, really. So yeah, I'm somewhere between 2.5 to 3 stars for this, which feels so harsh, but is accurate, I think. Like, if I compare this to Delilah Greene, I prefer Delilah Greene. So, but did I prefer this to Mr. Wrong Number? I think I maybe preferred Mr. Wrong Number. Like, I think, obviously, my expectations for this were so much higher, and that was part of the problem. I will still probably read everything Ali Hazelwood comes out with, because I love the Love Hypothesis so much, but I need to see something a little bit different from her. I love that we're always set in STEM, that's fine, but I need to see a different type of character, and I need them not to be small. And if they are going to be small, I need it not to be the defining part of their life. And I need the, like, average, I hate that word, average guys to just be like, oh yeah, they're just like this cute guy, but they're not good enough for me because they're not like a 6'4" tall drink of water. I need that not to be a thing. Like, I need Ali Hazelwood to step away from that, or I'm going to have to stop reading them, and I don't want to do that. So I don't really know what I'm going to do with this copy, because this is like one of the prettiest books I own, and I don't want to get rid of it, but there's no way I will reread this. Like, I just didn't enjoy it in any way enough that I could reread this book. So I am really disappointed, and I don't like to get ranty ravey about this because I'm genuinely sad. Like, the way I feel about the hating game is a totally separate thing. That's fine. But I'm genuinely sad about this because I really, really love The Love Hypothesis, and I wish that I had enjoyed this more, but unfortunately I didn't. So that is Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood. So that is it for my August wrap up. So we had a very good reading month of entirely romance, but I'm excited for it. In terms of my plans for September, because I'm not going to be making a September TBR video, so just to let you know, I am hoping to take part in Bookopolython, which is by Becky and the Books, but I will be rolling as I go and just filming one vlog for that. The reasons for that are going to be clear at the point I post that vlog, so that will be like beginning of October probably that I will post that, and so things will become clearer. But yes, there will be no September TBR video from me because I just can't set a TBR this month again, which will be explained in that video. In terms of some other videos I've got coming up, I've got the Love on the Brain vlog. If I read the final Emily Henry video, like book, then if I post that vlog, that would be up. I filmed a haul and I filmed a bookshelf organization, so there's a few things. It's just I need to get them up and scheduled and stuff like that, but there are a few things coming to the channel. So if you enjoyed this video, I really hope you'll stick around to see a little bit more about that content. If you did enjoy this video, I would massively appreciate a like. I would love it if you would comment down below. What have you been reading? What was your favorite book? Have you read any of these and what did you think? I would love to hear from you, so please do comment down below. I would love to have a chat. I will also be linking down below to my Goodreads and to my Instagram, which is peace.love.plan. I share my Instagram with my planning YouTube channel, so I'll also be linked to my planning YouTube channel in case you want to check out some planning content. Otherwise, I'll see you in my next video. Bye!